Hello, everybody. My name is Ian. Welcome to the Evolution Drink Your Tea podcast. I am joined with the main host of this channel, Seafood Joe Ledlow. Say hi.
Hello, everybody. I let Ian do this because he is going to surprise me with the topic. I don't know what we're going to talk about. I just said, drop it on me and I'll lose my shit accordingly.
So,
So, or drink my tea. I don't know.
so normally when we do these, we like to dive into something that's very, philosophical and open-ended questions. But I have something that's a little bit of fun today that we could probably cover pretty quickly. But my question to you, as somebody that exists in the ever-growing age of technology and gaming, is two parts.
Mhm.
One, if you do martial arts, does that make you better at fighting games? And if you play fighting
Mhm.
games, does that make you a better martial artist? Or can it make you a better martial artist?
Those are both uh, really good questions. And um, I have a short answer for does martial arts make you better at games? Short answer, yes, it does. And I'll have a story about that. Um, does playing games help you be a better martial artist? Short answer, yes and no. And then I'm going to dive into that one first, I think. It has to do with the artistry of it and the imagination and the cultivation. I think if you're playing a game, there's a lot of graphics, especially for today. Like that, it's such a visual journey when you play a game, and you can really immerse yourself into that and put yourself in this mindset. But sometimes the characters can move in ways, especially now. It's not the Pac-Man days that I grew up with. It's these cool three-dimensional characters that are giant epic things that you have to have pretty robust computer systems to even be able to run on, or you have to go buy a gaming system for it. And if you see these characters and you're taking these characters through, you you have to apply tactics, you have to apply strategies, and in that mindset, you're approaching one character, character one on level one, or the boss on level one is a difficulty, and you have to approach it to beat it in a certain way. The boss on level two, you have to approach in a different way. So you're exploring the diversity of tactics and problem solving that is required to be a martial artist. So seeing movements and seeing dynamic movements that can expand your imagination, and seeing or practicing the problem solving of how do you defeat each character or obstacle, how do you overcome these things in a game? I think those are really, really beneficial. I do think some of the problems that you can run into, you can be limited if you use it as an imagination booster. It's great, and then you go off from there. That's really great. But if you just lock yourself into that thought process or the restrictions of the game, whatever that might be, that can be a limiting factor. The other really, really, really big one for me, and this is the same for movies or TV shows, that when you see something, I guess there's two parts. One, if you're in a game, you got a cool freaking move, right? It's going to do a backflip or a jump spinny with a sword. That shit's not practical. It's not really what you're going to be doing. It's not sexy and cool, right? You're not like, ooh, wow, that I pulled off the super cool movement to make the character do this cool badass move. You would do really, really simple kind of, in a gaming system, it would be really boring. It's the Pac-Man version of chomp, 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 chomp. It's not the characters, beautifully flying through the air and spinning and slashing and, fireballs and shit like that. That's way cooler to play. But basically, in a real fight, you'd be doing the Pac-Man version of it. The other problem that I have with that can be a really big one is that you will start to see yourself in a third person, like a scripted movie, and you start getting into choreographing yourself. And so you have a predetermined mindset. I'm going to do one, two, three, four. and it's going to work. I'm going to do A, B, C, it's going to work. And you're not going, one, okay, what do I do now? Do I do two? Maybe I have to do B. Maybe I have to do seven. Maybe I have to do triangle. Whatever it is, but being alive from moment to moment, I think that a lot of times we start to have a character in our head and we follow that movie kind of script or that video game script instead of being alive and present in the moment. So I think it can be really, really great. And I think if you understand that dynamic, the duality of it, what are the benefits, what are the downsides? If you know a trap is there, it's really easy to avoid the trap. And so you can gain the benefits and easily or more easily avoid the pitfalls. Do you have anything you want to add to that one before I go back to the first question?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought this up because for me personally, there's a lot of actual layers with this that I'm glad that you brought up something different than what I was even going to mention. So, taking things into account, I think the long story is that if somebody were to ask me that question, I would say yes, but with diminishing returns. Because from an actual development standpoint, outside of your points, you have distancing and timing, you have
Mm-hmm.
reaction based things, you also have the strategy that you were mentioning. But the thing is that makes it a lot different than something combative or physical in the physical material world, right? Is for
Mm-hmm.
one, the amount of variables that and being able to deal with the
Yep.
unexpected. The other
Yep.
thing
Absolutely.
is that, and like not to get too nerdy into stuff, but your character in a game has so many frames, so many still frames to complete a movement, and it's becoming more and more. But the thing with that is that you are utilizing that timing, and it's capped from different stuff, and so you can a lot of times like your distancing and your timing and your reaction can only be so good because we're usually
Yeah.
limited to 60 frames per second.
And there's also in with the processing of the movements is also in there, not just the filming frames, but the processor too. The character, or it can be built in the design. The character has to have a reset. So you do cool move. There's a cooldown
And a
that
cooldown,
isn't
exactly, to
it
balance the
isn't
game.
necessarily proportional so that you get these cool images. And that's part of what we love about these games is, hey, I did a cool move and there's a superhero pose at the end of it, right? Because I finished off the boss on level 42 and look at my character being super badass. And then they do a 360 spin around, which we're like, wow, that's super awesome. That's my big dopamine payoff for playing the game. But it's not the same reality that you're going to be facing if you're doing it in person.
I actually Googled this not too long ago, but I typed in like what frame rate is people's vision, which I thought was really interesting to think about because it's
Hmm.
not like one to one, of course, but what came up through a few different answers, I don't have the research linked or whatever, but what I saw was 60 frames. So it's interesting because I do think that it, you are limited to your vision, which is another good point when you are playing a game. Whereas I
Mm-hmm.
think the body can move and react faster than that. And that has to be cultivated. That gets into a lot of the stuff that we do with feel, with having an actual reaction, with the momentary things. But I think that if you are solely relying on visual to say like mono mono like hand connections, there's other things that come into play that you miss from that. The other thing too is,
Well,
go ahead.
I was just say the what you're to adding to what you're bringing in is the full immersion of a human being into a an environment. It's not just a two-dimensional, even though they're 3D games or whatever. If you've ever played it on your screen and then played like a VR game, like where you go and put a backpack on, a big headset set
Hmm.
and play around there, it's a different experience. Well, if you're doing that in reality, you're going to have so much more. Like you're talking about the tactile of making contact. It's not just the visual and the auditory of a punch hitting and landing, but it's the visceral return And then your brain is a massive supercomputer, and your subconscious can crunch all that data that's
Mm-hmm.
coming in from multiple sources. So you're not just doing a two-dimensional visual input, you have a, or even, like cool stereo audio input too, but you also have that physical coming into it, which is a big deal. And there's a lot of data that our body works on. And any martial art that you train in, I know there's the game naysayers out there like sensitivity training is not important.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can all kind of safely go, well, they're idiots.
Yeah.
Because there's no martial art, there's no sport that I know of that doesn't do sensitivity or tactile awareness training,
We.
because it's just
eh,
like you can't, as a human, you're basically shutting that off. And I don't know any coach or instructor who would say, well, don't use one of the biggest, you know, interpreters of data for your environment. It
Right.
doesn't say make sense.
I mean,
Which goes into the push and pull of seeing a character move forward is one thing, but a character grabbing a hold of you and pushing you forward is
displacing
a
you.
different
Yeah.
feel. Yeah, it's a different
Absolutely.
feel.
Yeah, I think that there are to the merit of cultivation, there are some things that are interesting, and I don't think that, at least for me, whenever I play things like this, I'm not utilizing the actualization of like I'm going to fight somebody by throwing a fireball. But something that you might find interesting is that the way that highly competitive players are competing against each other is they actually are looking for the most efficient, we call them
Hmm.
confirms, combinations or moves that you can use as what would be called a poke, or something that you can spam like a jab, because it is this much damage over a smaller amount of time, actually applying
Yeah.
an aspect of efficiency to it. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Whereas
absolutely.
if you are whiffing, let's say you're going to do a big jumping dragon punch, well, you've got all those frames like you had talked about to recover. And there is a parallel with that, but it doesn't necessarily, like we said, equate to the physical realm. Now, another piece of thing that, or of data that might be interesting, is that uh, computers these days are now doing stuff that are beyond 60 frames, which some PCs are doing 240, I think is the standard for first person shooters, to where I would say if you're just working on reaction time,
Hmm.
work on target training through the first person stuff. They actually have software for that
Hmm.
now. And I actually think that there is some merit into what kids call locking in, if you know what I mean. But it's a very
I
different
was gonna say,
skill, yeah, than just.
I was, I was gonna say that that is something else where you bring up the locking in, the focusing, the hyper focus, and the which is kind of a double-edged sword
Right.
of kids, I can't focus on anything else over there, but I can focus on this video game. Well, look, I got ADHD, and I'm going to tell you the parallels between them are pretty high. If you find that playing a video game, you can lock in and stay hyper focused for a prolonged period of time,
Mm.
and it's a fighting type of game, martial arts might be your thing, because if you can then say, hey, why didn't I make that jump to try to lock in over there? That's what I did. I mean, I didn't have anybody like us having a podcast talking about it. I didn't have martial arts when I was well, I had wrestling. I found that I could do that because it was a movement that was real life video games. I talk about martial arts is real life video games. It's just much, it's not virtual reality, it's reality.
Right.
And there's a high immersion that you can do if you can learn to focus on that immersion, because you are getting that fix that a lot of times you need for ADHD, ADD, or just being a kid who's like, what's happening? Give me more stimulation and I can just stay focused on it. But I think that going from, if you do it the right way,
Mm.
with sort of eyes wide open, hey, I'm doing a video game and I'm thinking about, I'm a martial artist. Is this a parallel? Can I train that reactivity? Yes, I think you can. But if you're just like, hey, I'm doing if you're sitting on a couch and you're got a controller in your hand and you're playing a video game and you think, oh, I can go out and fight somebody because I'm a really high level gamer,
Yeah.
and you're overweight and you don't have good musculature and you've got zero cardio and you haven't done anything physical, hey, guess what? You're gonna get your ass kicked. Um,
Yeah. Just because you
But
play UFC 24 and you might be
yeah,
ranked one does not mean that you have the sauce to cook, is what we would say.
yeah, you got to be able to do it. But if you are doing both of them at the same time, and maybe that's the big one. If you're doing, I'm doing my martial arts training, and I'm also gaming, I would say you would need to kind of keep those. Which I was, here's a big one. So if you're going to train in martial arts, it, you got to train in it, like, and not just go to class. So Ian and I, like, Ian, when was the last time you were actually in a class?
With you. So 2021, maybe?
Yeah. So it's been a minute, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean you've done zero training in all that time?
No, I'm in incredible shape. Like almost
But
as good
and
as show
that's
shape. Yeah.
yeah, that's what we're talking about is you need to be training on your own. And if you're playing a video game and that's going to help you think like, hey, I played this video game and I worked some stuff, then go figure out how to do that stuff for real. And maybe that's the big one. If you're going to make that gap, hey, there was an idea presented in the video game where I had a combination and I found this was really efficient to hit the opponent that way. Well, when I go to my martial arts class, I'm going to see if I can't find a parallel in my actual movements when I'm doing sparring with somebody, whether you're doing a grappling art or a striking art, whatever, and figure out how can I do it? What's the, hey, if I'm Taekwondo, how can I find the equivalent to like a little quick little kick? Pop, 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 pop. Hey, this is the fastest one.
Hmm.
Pretty sure it's what they call chugging. Um, there's also, if you're doing boxing, hey, look, I could figure out a jab to just pepper him with it
Right.
to set up for that bigger movement. How do I establish a setup? Because if I can't just walk up with my character and do my big flashy move, because it takes too much setup and the other character just wipes me out, how do I do that? Or if you're playing whatever the interactive games on there, how do you beat people? How are you using your environment to win? I guess that's a big one. Are you using your environment?
Yeah, yeah. And I think also too, like, I mean, it's a little bit different when you're doing player versus environment or what we call PvE because the game will always give you the tools you need to succeed, and that's kind of part of it. That's why it's a game, right? Because it's meant to be
Mm-hmm.
conquered at some point or another. But having that awareness and utilizing that, there are some games that have a lot of creative freedom with how you problem solve and exploiting that. But I think that the awareness is really what unlocks that
Mm-hmm.
value within gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think the consensus is that you don't usually pick up on that if you only game and think that it's going to apply to the real world in that and means of combat. But if you are training in martial arts and you're already aware about these things, you start to see them in gaming so much. And my contribution to that was going to be talking about the 5 ways of attack that go into shit
So
anything, right?
let's segue and go back to that first question. Does training in martial arts help you with your gaming?
Yes,
Yes.
100%.
And here's where to go. I'm going to give you two of them, and I don't remember the games particular because it was a while ago for both of them. One is a personal experience that I had at one of my instructor's house. I went to Virginia and was in the DC area and was uh, staying with an instructor and was training there and with Vince. I was
Vince,
with
yeah,
Vince.
that's
Um,
what I suspected.
he had real world experience, applying stuff with the guns and being in combat situations. And we were playing this. He had a game, and I was playing it. It was some first person, uh, you know, what is it? SOCON
Hmm.
was that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
SOCOM.
So it's one of those. I think that's what it was. Which I think is also the other one. The other example I want to talk about. So I was playing this, and whether it was that game or not. Sorry, people, if I'm saying the wrong one. But I came up, and I was supposed to like snipe somebody in a house. And he goes, "Well, all you do is you got to get up here on the hill, and then you scope into it, and then you slowly track from one side to another until you see the person inside the house." And it was really using the picture aspect of, if you think about, there's a midpoint,
Mm.
like a teeter totter, and you're on one end. I'm on the far right, and I'm looking to the left side of the room through the window. As I move to my left, that picture is gonna move to the right, and I'm gonna see over through there, so I can see a wider angle. And it was great. And I was like, holy crap. And then we opened up several other things. He's like, well, this is how we would do it in the real world.
Mm.
And there's a lot of things, the 5 ways of attack. If you've been practicing those in your martial arts class with your school, whatever level you're at, and you've been practicing those things, and you have that visceral, full immersion understanding of something, then when you get into a game, you start going, how can I apply this? And there's a great commercial that was out for years, and I think it was for the same game. And it was a bunch of different gamers, and they were all with headsets on, and they're playing this game. And it was like you're playing in from wherever all over the world.
Hmm.
And one guy's like, I'm out. Where are they? Where are they? And then another player's like, they got me. And this all these players from all over the place were getting killed off. And then it shows two military guys who were in the desert somewhere, and they go like shooting fish in a barrel.
Right. I think that
And the
was
thing was,
SOCOM.
they were these were special forces guys who were off in the desert on tour, but they were playing and locked in to go somewhere else. And I don't think
Hmm.
that could ever actually happen for security reasons, but it was a really great commercial for the idea of like, hey, I'm in my bedroom, and I'm playing this. I'm a 16-year-old kid,
Right.
and why am I just getting dominated? Like gamer after gamer after gamer getting dominated. Well, this other person was a gamer, but they were also a military elite, special operations person.
There were,
And I don't remember. It's a cool commercial. This is a really cool commercial. It
well,
played for a while.
I was going to say in even recent times, which, I question everything that's like, which is probably something else that might be worth talking about that's kind of outside of the world of martial arts, but it's a short. And I'm always skeptical whenever I watch shorts and stuff because, like, they always have these situations that are set up where something pans out or whatever. Um, Regardless, it is an interesting thought, but the title of it was, Special Forces old man, grandpa, is
Hmm.
wrecking everybody in Call of Duty. And there he is sniping, making the adjustments due to wind and, distance and like
Yeah.
changing the angle and stuff. And he's like picking people
Hmm.
off and celebrating over it. And it's like, I do think that there is value and merit to bridging that skill set because I think that a lot of these games are based off of reality for one. And I'm not
They
talking
are.
about
They are.
reality as in a means of like they're as real as possible, but as a means of like life imitates art and art imitates life kind of thing.
Well, I do think that they're coming into it because the games are, for a lot of those games, if you're doing a sniping game or a simulating game where you have to fly something, the gamer people are going to go to the experts who do understand it. And they're going to
Yeah.
talk about, like, how does wind affect a bullet? And it might change a little bit. It might not be quote unquote reality because it's a gaming system. However, that system you can learn just like you can learn reality of like,
Right.
hey, this is what a 5 mile an hour crosswind going left to right, this is what it feels like, and this is the adjustment I have to make on this particular rifle at that particular distance. Well, that's true for anything. If you change rifles, you're going to have to make a different adjustment. If you have different windage or different air temperature, it's going to adjust. If you've done that, if you have that experience, and I've done some high power shooting,
Yeah, I haven't
but
done it either.
very amateur, and I'm nowhere remotely close. I've done it, but like, look, there's so many people who know so much more than I do. I was like 16, 17, 18 when I was shooting. I might have been still shooting at 19, but and it was I shot an M1 Garand. If you don't know, it's the old top loading 8 round
World War
that was
II.
used in World War II.
Yep.
Yep. With
Hmm.
the old big fixed bayonets. We didn't have bayonets, but it was part of a ball program
Yeah.
in the States where you could get rifles and ammunition. So they had stuff left over from World War II, and they were sending it out. Basically, you hear about the Second Amendment. It's literally, there were programs, I don't know if they're still in play today, but you
Crazy.
could get a thing, and you were going to ranges and stuff. There was ranges that we went to, and there was a lot of people there to help sort of coach you into shooting, to maintain people who could shoot. So if you turn into some old guy was in Vietnam or Korean War or something like that, or even now where they're coming through, and they
Right.
were taught all those in a professional setting by the sniper schools, then they go through. I just watched the video, and it was one of the U.S. snipers who's a top guy, and he was talking about like the best snipers in the world, and they were talking about this and that, and he was talking about the sniper schools, and some of the best ones were, I think he said the German schools were really good because they maintain it, so the school is always running,
Mm.
and they don't ever close the school, so you don't have to relearn the information. Your people are always there
Yeah.
and doing stuff.
Constant refreshes and opens and stuff, even maybe after
But
you've left.
the other thing he said was, and I don't remember if it was them or somebody else. He said they're really, really good at the basics, the fundamentals of sniping, not necessarily shooting,
Hmm.
but everything else that goes with it. So you can make the adjustments and windage and range and all that, and you can shoot and hit the target. Well, there's also all of the, I have to get into position so that I can fire the round, and then I have to be able to extract myself safely. Because like everybody you shoot somebody as a sniper. We're going with that example apparently. Uh, Everyone's going to try to kill you afterwards, right? Because you're assuming you hit a high value target of someone of importance in
Yeah.
the area. They're going to go after you. Yeah, it's just like in a real fight. If you punch somebody and you hurt them, you punch somebody in the nose and you give them a bloody nose, they're going to come after you. So you have to be able to extract yourself out of that. So it's not just can I throw a really good punch? Can I throw a really good kick? Can I do a really sweet throw? How do you set that up? And it goes back into your strategies, the 5 ways of attack, which are just outlined. Bruce just outlined them. It wasn't like he came up with this shit and was like, look, no one's ever thought about it.
Right.
That wasn't it. He just put together his own training program and collected the things that he thought were best from what he had experienced up to that point in his life. And then he just called it Jeet Kune Do.
So, which is interesting because, like, we're talking about modern mediums and stuff, but, obviously, if I'm not mistaken, he got that from Musashi with the Book of Five Rings. And what he did was exactly what we're talking about. He referenced a piece of media, a piece of art, a book, and figured out how to translate that without a
Mm-hmm.
sword, because in Musashi's book, that's what he's mostly talking about is actual, like, Bushido, right? Um,
No.
and so now, flip flop it again. We talk more so about this in means of exchanging hands and kicks and all that, unarmed combat for the most part. And now we're looking at it in a means of like, huh, okay, well, now I've learned that I can play Spaceys in Super Smash Brothers, or I've got a confirmed combo that if this lands, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to follow up with something else, or I'm going to bait somebody to jump off the stage and attack by draw, or I've got a
Mm-hmm.
missile that is constantly seeking but it goes around a shield, or you know what I mean, just things like that that
Yep.
also go into exactly what you were talking about at the very beginning of this podcast with the imagination, right? Now,
Yep.
whenever I teach or whenever I taught to kids, I use those references because I'm like, how many of you have played Smash Bros? How many of you have played
Yep.
Street Fighter? How many of you
Yep.
have played this? Okay, well, this is like this in this world, and it creates a more modernized language of how to explain a lot of stuff that can sometimes come off as stuffy.
Yeah. And I think that's part of, well, going with information, going with the Book of Five Rings, The Art of War, they've been translated several times. And then even then, the language is pretty convoluted.
Yeah,
And there, honestly, it's really difficult. Someone goes, oh, yeah, I just read through it and I totally get it. You're full of shit. Like,
yeah,
that's going to be mine. Unless you've like read 15, but I'm going to say you probably read it when you were younger, and then you've advanced and you came back to it. There might be a few exceptions of people who are very well read and very well trained in other things who then come to it. But mostly I say that because of the language that's used, even in the translations, they're very difficult to get through.
right.
It's very philosophy, like blah blah blah. There are some more modern books that are out there, and Ian, exactly what you're talking about, of being able to go, hey, here's a modern example. As an instructor, your job is to help the student understand, not just keep saying the same thing like, hey, this is how I learned it. That's the way you should learn it. I was just talking about this with, I did a class, and I had some new people in there. It was an open house thing. And I said, I learned a back fall and side fall and all this stuff. And I did them a whole lot more difficult of like showing them off on hardwood floors. And here's how I do a break fall on a hard surface. It's really tough on your body, and it's not the best way to train. And I was like, I don't want my kids to learn that way. So why would I want your kids to learn that way? I don't want to do it that way. So, but how do you learn the movements without the negative consequence? And
Totally,
how do you make it fun? How do you make it fun too?
totally side question. I don't remember if I sent this to you or not, but it was last week. Did I send you that cart full that I totally just like ate shit on
Oh yeah,
because
you
of a
did.
bad
You're like,
takeoff?
so like always practicing my back fall.
Yeah. So learning to backfall can save your life if you tumble and flip. I think this is probably like the fourth or fifth video in a year that I've sent you where I've just like totally eaten it and slapped out and uh, not hit my
It's
head.
really,
It's very
I was
useful.
talking about. I was explaining it to the kids. I had some little kids that were in there, and I had some grown-ups who, they're one of them, John, is in his early 50s, and very successful in his business, and he goes out and he's a sales guy. He interacts with a lot of people through his company, and a handshake is pretty important.
Yeah.
And I will go to him because he's somebody who's, I'm like, hey, you use this a lot, and you're someone that's your livelihood. How well do you give a handshake? So when we bow in kung fu or JKD or any other martial art, if you have a more Eastern bowing, whether it's a hand over the fist or a double fist or hands to your side and bowing, a lot of times Westerners don't really understand that. And especially kids, they're like, what the heck are you doing? Like, what's the bow? And then I go, hey, it's like a handshake. Maybe they're too young to really appreciate a handshake, but it gives them that introduction to it. And then I go, hey, give me a high five. And then I say, give me a knuckle bump. And I say, hey, put your hands in. Go team. Who's done all those? And they're like, yeah, I've done all those. Like, who likes a bad high five? Is a high five, if it's not good, you do it again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's the bowing in process. That's the, hey, it's the same idea. And John was like, I've never, he goes, because, you're with kids. I don't see the kids. He's in the adult class. But he said it was very interesting to listen to me explain it to these kids. And his appreciation was they're developing skills that will grow with them as they go into their adulthood and use that, whether they're on a sporting team with other athletes or if they're out in the working world. Whatever it is, the means, whether it's a knuckle bump, a fist bump, or a high five, or a handshake, or a bow, it's a way to connect with someone in a respectful way. And that's the important part. I have no idea where we're going with stuff. We
Yeah.
haven't bashed on anybody today.
No, no. Today was
um,
all relative stuff, I think, or just fun stuff, I think. I love to get into the intricacies of what we study, but I think that we're doing a good job of painting the parallels of what makes martial arts valuable outside of just learning to fight and how
hmm
we see it. We talk about it all the time about how we see this stuff in so many aspects of our daily lives. And, I don't play games as much as I used to, but I think that a lot of people will be able to relate to this. And if you're out
I
there
think
in the
so as well.
comments, yeah, if you're out there in the comments and you've had experience where you've connected some kind of skill to a virtual, whether that be, you skate in real life and then you play a skating game or, it doesn't have to be fighting. We want to know in the comments.
I I think I want to add one last thing for everybody to take this one with you, and then you can share. Tell us in the comments if you've had this experience. I've seen a lot where all the choreography, the fight choreography done in movies, it's martial arts guys out there doing it. And they're the ones doing it. So they're creating really cool stuff. But then they see something in a video game or in a cartoon, and somebody creates something there because they're inspired by what they see there,
Yeah.
because those guys are taking from their real martial arts. Hey, what can we add to it to make it into a cool thing up here? Then let's put that into a video game. And then now the other guys are like, well, wait a minute, I just saw something really cool that this character did in a video game. Can we figure out how to do that in a movie? So they're going to go play around with their training partners to figure out if it's something they can actually do.
Yeah.
Because then you can create the scenario where it does work inside of a movie, and then you go bump 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 bump, and it keeps going back and forth. And I think those things are really big. And I say that because I have trained with guys who then went on to work in major movies and were doing just what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean,
And that's the cycle that you've been talking about the whole time.
and on Instagram even, if you look up people imitating characters from things like Tekken, because they're all very like you know what they're doing because of the movements,
Mm-hmm.
So like Horang does Taekwondo, so there's people that are doing Taekwondo being like doing their combos, or
Mm-hmm.
there are capoeira artists pretending or mimicking the combos from Eddie Gordo or stuff like that, and it's really cool to see those parallels. And as as we've been saying, life imitates art and art imitates life, and it's a
Yep.
constant fueling of I'm going to do this until it's possible, and now it's in a game, but then someone else sees it and they're like, well, I'm going to one up that, and it becomes this ever growing system of evolution.
Evolution. Here's
Evolution.
one cool. You just made me think of something that kind of goes back into my ADHD and fixating with something. So when you get in a game, whatever your game is, and you're playing a game, and you have that one level, and you're just like, damn it, I'm just gonna sit here and play this stupid game until I figure it out.
Dark Souls.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna do it again. The next day, I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna do it again. And that determination to stay there and just put in the time
Yeah.
to figure it out is the same thing that you do all the time, Ian, with tricking. I just got to figure it out. I've got to figure it out. I'm going to do it over and over. You're doing martial arts. How do I put these movements together? How do I get the timing for this to work out? You got to do it over and over and over. And sometimes it's a sweet, easy thing to do. But honestly, most of the time, you got to just sit there and fiddle with it and play with it. So if your imagination can be inspired by playing a video game, or if it can help expand your thought process and imagination to the way you perceive and look at a problem, I think that's really fantastic. But just remember, whether you're playing the video game or doing it in your martial arts, you have to spend the time doing it
Mhm.
if you want it to be there. And you know, I I gave the example today. I was like, hey kids, if we're playing video game, like we do a backfall, we're on the mats. I'm pretty good at it. You don't need to go that fast. Like you're just learning this. If we
Right.
play one of your games, I'm probably going to be terrible at it and you're going to be really good at it. And they're like, oh yeah. I said, well, it's the same thing, except here there's different consequences, which is the other one. If your character dies or gets beat up in a video game,
You try again. Yeah.
no, nobody cares. You just hit restart. Even if you're like, I lost it, I didn't save it. You're not bleeding and you're not dead.
Right.
Whereas in martial arts, even if you're in a martial arts school and Ian and I are sparring, and I'm like, I'm going to try something. Well, you have to develop the way that the consequences aren't going to be like, oh, I'm going to try something, and Ian just goes boom and jacks me in the face,
Right.
and I'm missing teeth now because we were stupid and he went really hard and I was really dumb and I didn't wear a mouth guard and I didn't do this and we didn't have you know the consequences are too high. You're not going to want to put in that time. So if you're putting on gloves and a mouth guard and headgear, realize that it's sort of like playing a video game. You're not in reality. So the whole, which is all right. No, it's going to be I'm going to go off on
I know
somebody
exactly
right
where you're
now.
going with this. Yeah.
I got to go off on it right now. The whole group of you, and if you're one of these people, I can't believe you made it this far into the podcast. You
Right.
probably
Here it
didn't.
comes.
Everybody else should
Hard
probably know about it.
sparring.
Fucking hardcore sparring, you're an idiot. One, it's really abusive to your body. Two, you're not actually cultivating skills the timing and distancing, all the things that we're talking about of being able to problem solve. It's the same thing as doing a break fall on a hard floor surface just to show you can. There's no real benefit to it other than you're damaging your body. Now, once or twice, or it does it to because you're saving yourself. Yeah,
Mm.
like I did one, as I like to give my own stupid example. I went sledding and then stood up on a sled and went down the hill, got to the bottom, and the sled went to the right really, really fast. And I had a whole lot of speed and it's all white and couldn't really tell. So I went down. I didn't actually put my arms out, but I did tuck my chin. I broke 2 ribs in my back. Um, but you know what? Uh, in that moment, it saved me from cracking my head open. But I had broken ribs and it took me months to recover.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that every time you go to class. It's not sustainable. So you have to put on sparring equipment and you have to spar in a manner that's not idiotic. Because I'm just going to go out there, like, that's like the old like ghetto backyard brawl kind of
Right.
stuff where two people just go to beat the shit out of themselves. They don't know anything about anything. You might as well just, that's like the two idiots who got drunk at a bar and they're in the parking lot after closing time and neither one of them's got a chick. So they're just going to beat the snot out of each other.
Yeah.
They got other stuff. You know what? Therapy. Therapy is better than that. Uh, it's no sense in it. It's not sustainable. You're not going to gain any real skills. Yeah.
Dragon Ball Z fighters and Naruto fighters don't lose teeth when they spar. You know,
Yeah, Goku looks a little bit roughed up, but miraculously there's like some little
plot armor.
bead or yeah,
Yeah.
well, there's what the senso beads,
Yeah, sensu
beans
bean.
is yeah. So they could take the little, someone's always got a miracle drug that, oh, suddenly I'm all cured. I'm
Yeah.
all fine. My black eye has gone away.
Yeah.
You know what? If you're not an alien from another planet, and you're not, it doesn't work that way. That's where you have to go. Can so going my final note on this, and I'm going to shut up for real this time. Maybe probably
Maybe.
if you play it and enjoy it, and you're using it for inspiration and using it as a practice for something, just like a math class at school would help you practice, but it's not actually engineering. You're not, well, maybe you are, but practicing number crunching is going to help you, do the math to figure out for engineering, but it's not engineering, right?
Right.
But you still need that skill set. But if you can have someone introduce a new idea to you or understand a new way of approaching math, then it changes it. So suddenly you're into geometry or you're dealing with variables like in algebra. Suddenly oh, I've got a new formula. This helps me figure out the square footage of something. This helps me figure out the angle right here. That's a skill. And then you apply it to something in the real world if you're going to build something or you have to use it practically. If you can get that same thing from a video game and then figure out how to apply it, and it's also really flippin' fun to play a video game and it's entertaining and you can practice those skill sets and you can explore them, that's genuinely beneficial to you.
I think so too.
You just have to realize that, again, my character, it it just respawns whenever I wanted to,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
I don't respawn, and I don't have magic. You can't just pick up a little health kit off the ground or a
Yeah.
little
It'd be
heart.
fine.
There's no little floating first aid kits or hearts or magic potions from the store that you can buy that are going to miraculously make you recover. Sorry, gang.
Yeah. You're not just going to pop your blown out shoulder back in and then everything is good to go. It's,
Yeah,
these
that will
things.
be
Yeah.
that's a lifer right there. You pop your shoulder out, it's a lifer.
Yeah. Well,
Ian, what do you want to wrap up with?
Well, I was just going to say that if you all are interested in more information on the things that we do, the things that we cultivate, I would suggest checking out, for one, the other videos on our channel or the other podcast episodes. And two, we actually have a masterclass available that we'll leave a link in the description to for the basics of Jeet Kune Do that can either supplement your training or get you into something that can kind of, you know, maybe you're a gamer or something and you want to start applying some of this stuff and making these connections, or maybe you're an expert and you just want some extra information.
Yeah, it's like playing a different kind of video game. And I will say the lessons are really concise. We put a
Yeah,
lot of effort
a lot.
into maximizing the information. So you might have a really in-depth 2-minute section that is going to cover a massive amount of information, but it's constantly about the information, not just filler. When we're talking blah, 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 that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I agreed. Well, on that note, thanks for joining us, everybody. One favor would be awesome is to like the video and leave some comments. And if you enjoyed this talk that Sifu Joel and I had, then maybe share it with somebody and tell someone about us. That'd be super helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
See ya.